The ship called Siren's Light drifted through empty space, far beyond the edges of known territory. High Navigator Orin stood at the command deck, his four eyes scanning the darkness ahead. His species, the Vaulat, were explorers by nature. They mapped the stars. They found new worlds. But in 300 years of service, Orin had never seen anything like what his sensors were showing him now. "Check the readings again," he ordered his crew. "We have checked them 5 times. "Navigator," his second officer replied. "The readings are correct." Orin felt his throat tighten. The sensors showed massive objects ahead, hundreds of them. Each one was larger than anything the Galactic Accord had ever built. They floated in perfect formation inside a dark cloud of gas and dust, as if someone had placed them there with great care and then left them to sleep. "Take us closer," Orin said. Slowly, the Siren's Light moved forward. As they entered the nebula, the shapes became clearer on their screens. They were ships. Warships. Ancient beyond measure, covered in strange metals that their computers could not identify. Each vessel was at least 50 times larger than the biggest Accord battleship. "This is impossible," whispered the navigation officer. "Who built these? When?" Orin had no answer. He ordered a boarding team to prepare. Someone had to go inside and find out what they had discovered. The team entered through a hull breach on the nearest ship. Inside, the air was cold and still. Their lights cut through darkness that had lasted for countless years. The walls were covered in writing, symbols, and images. The style was simple but powerful. Everything was built for war. "Navigator," the team leader called through the communication link. "You need to see this." He sent an image back to the Siren's Light. Orin looked at it and felt his blood run cold. The symbols on the walls were human. The writing was in an ancient human language. The images showed human faces, human hands, human bodies in armor that looked like something from a nightmare. "That cannot be right," Orin said. "Humans are a Tier 7 species. They have basic technology. They control only a small cluster of systems near the galactic edge. They are unremarkable." But the evidence was clear. These ships, these weapons of impossible power, belonged to humanity, or they once did. Orin immediately contacted Galactic Accord Central Command. Within hours, the message had spread through classified channels to every major power in the galaxy. An emergency session of the Galactic Council was called Far Away. On a research station orbiting a dead moon, a human man named Taiho was eating his lunch alone. He was an archaeologist, one of the few humans working alongside alien species in academic positions. His colleagues respected his work but never quite accepted him. To them, he was a curiosity. Humans were considered simple, young, unimportant in the grand scheme of galactic civilization. Taiho did not mind the loneliness. He loved his work. He studied ancient ruins and forgotten cultures. He pieced together histories that others had abandoned. But today, something felt different. A strange energy buzzed through the station. Alien researchers whispered to each other and fell silent when he walked past. "What is happening?" he asked one of his Vaulat colleagues. The Vaulat looked at him with an expression Taiho had never seen before. It was not disrespect. It was something closer to fear. "You'll find out soon enough, human," the Vaulat said, and walked away. On the other side of the galaxy, a woman named Minji received an urgent summons. She served as a military attached to the Galactic Accord, one of only a handful of humans in such positions. She was sharp, disciplined, and proud of her heritage. Even if others looked down on her species, the summons came from the Council itself. Minji was to report immediately to Thesser Prime, the capital world of the Accord. When she arrived, the council chamber was filled with representatives from all 12 major species. The Vaulat sat in their curved seats. The massive Keth filled one corner of the room with their stone-like bodies. The Mordran watched everything with their cold, calculating eyes. And at the center of attention stood Ambassador Sujin, the leader of humanity's small delegation. She was an older woman with gray hair and a calm face. But today, even she looked confused and worried. "You have been called here to explain yourselves," the council speaker announced. The Vaulat have made a discovery that changes everything we thought we knew about humanity. Images appeared on the great screens around the chamber. The ancient warships, the human symbols, the impossible technology. These vessels are human in origin, the speaker continued. Each one carries enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. There are hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, and they have been hidden beyond the rim for what appears to be over 100,000 years. Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. "We demand to know," the speaker said, "what humanity is hiding. What are you truly capable of? And why have you pretended to be weak?" Ambassador Sujin stood silent for a long moment. Minji watched her carefully. She could see the genuine confusion on the old woman's face. "I do not know," Sujin finally said. "We know nothing of these ships. We have no record of them. If this is truly human technology, it comes from an age we have completely forgotten." The chamber erupted in argument. Some species called her a liar. Others demanded immediate action against humanity. A few suggested patience and investigation. Minji stood in the back, her mind racing. She had always felt that humanity was meant for something greater. She had always believed that her people had hidden depths. But this was beyond anything she had imagined. What had humanity been? What had they done? And why did they not remember? Far away, in the dark nebula, the ancient ships continued to drift in silence. But deep inside the largest vessel, something stirred. A light flickered in a chamber that had been dark for 100,000 years. Systems that had slept since before the current civilizations were born began to wake. A voice, neither human nor machine, but something in between, whispered into the void. Containment status, unstable. Threat level, rising. Initiating reconnaissance protocols. The war that had ended an age ago was not truly over. It had only been paused. And now something in the darkness of the galaxy was waking up. Something that humanity had once fought with everything they had. The ancient ships knew. They remembered, and soon the children of Earth would have to remember too. The galaxy was about to learn that the quiet humans at the edge of known space were not what they seemed. They never had been, and a war was about to begin again. The Galactic Council did not trust humanity's claims of ignorance. Too many questions remained unanswered. Too much fear had spread through the ruling species. They demanded a full investigation. They wanted it immediately. Taiho received his orders 3 days after the emergency session. He was to join a research team traveling to Earth. Their mission was to access the historical vault, a sealed archive buried deep beneath the mountains of what was once called Korea. The vault predated humanity's official history by tens of thousands of years. No one had entered it in living memory. Minji was assigned to the same team as a security liaison. She did not like working with aliens who looked at her with suspicion, but she understood why they were afraid. If her ancestors had built weapons capable of destroying fleets, then humanity was not the harmless species everyone believed. The team arrived on Earth on a gray morning. Rain fell over the mountains as they approached the vault entrance. Taiho had studied many ancient sites, but he had never felt anything like the weight that pressed down on him as he stood before the massive doors. "The seals are old," one of the Vaulat scientists observed. "Very old pre-Accord. Pre-everything we know. Can we open them?" Minji asked. Taiho stepped forward. He did not know why, but something pulled him toward the doors. He placed his hand on the cold metal surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the doors began to move. "How did you do that?" the Vaulat demanded. "I do not know," Taiho admitted. "It just felt right." Inside the vault, the air smelled of age and secrets. The walls were lined with storage units, each one containing data crystals and physical artifacts. The team spread out to examine everything they could find. Taiho was drawn to a central chamber. Here, a single pedestal held a glowing crystal larger than his head. Words appeared in the air when he approached, written in a language he should not have understood. But somehow he could read every word. "Children of Earth," the message began. "If you are reading this, then the forgetting has held. You do not know who you were. You do not remember what you did. This is by design. This is your protection and your punishment." Taiho called the others. Together, they watched as the crystal revealed humanity's true history. Long ago, humanity had ruled a quarter of the galaxy. They were not Tier 7. They were Tier 1, the highest classification. Their technology was beyond anything that existed today. Their fleets numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Their empire stretched across countless stars, but humanity had not been kind rulers. The early empire was built on conquest. They subjugated weaker species. They took what they wanted. They believed they were destined to control everything. Then came the war. An enemy appeared from beyond the galaxy's edge. The records called it the Silence. It was not a species in any normal sense. It was a force, a phenomenon, a wave of absolute destruction that consumed everything it touched. Matter, energy, thought, memory, all of it vanished into nothing when the Silence passed through. Humanity fought. For 10,000 years, they threw everything they had against the enemy. Billions died. Entire worlds were lost. The empire crumbled under the weight of endless war. In the end, humanity found a way to contain the Silence. They could not destroy it, but they could trap it, seal it away in a prison of space and time. The cost was terrible. Most of humanity's population was gone. Their technology was broken. Their spirit was shattered. The survivors made a choice. They would forget. Using their remaining science, they erased their own memories. They destroyed their records. They hid their weapons and let their technology decay. They became small, weak, unremarkable, hiding in plain sight at the edge of the galaxy. We chose to forget. The message continued, because we could not bear to remember. We chose to become nothing because we had been too much. But we left behind the vanguard, our final defense. If the Silence ever breaks free, the vanguard will wake. And our children must be ready to remember who they were. The chamber fell silent. Minji felt tears on her cheeks, though she did not know when she had started crying. Taiho stood frozen, his mind trying to process what he had learned. "This changes everything," whispered one of the Keith researchers. Humanity was not harmless. They were monsters. "We were survivors," Minji said sharply. "We fought something that would have destroyed everyone. We saved the galaxy, and then you erased your own memory? How convenient." The argument might have continued, but another part of the archive activated. A warning message, old beyond measure, began to play. Containment breach detected. Probability of failure increasing. The Silence stirs. The vanguard must be warned. The children of Earth must prepare. Everyone stared at the message. "When was this warning recorded?" Taiho asked. The answer appeared. The warning was new. It had been generated just days ago, triggered by the same sensors that had watched over the containment for 100,000 years. The Silence was waking up. The prison that humanity had built at such terrible cost was beginning to fail. And somewhere in the dark nebula, the ancient warships were responding. Taiho understood now why he had been able to open the vault doors. Why certain things felt familiar, even though he had never learned them. The memory purge had been thorough, but it had not been complete. Somewhere deep in human blood, in human bones, in human minds, the old knowledge waited. "We need to warn everyone," Minji said. "The Council, all the species, everyone needs to know what is coming." "They will not believe us," Taiho replied. "They barely believe what they have seen already, and we make them believe." As they left the vault, Taiho looked up at the gray sky. Rain continued to fall on the mountains of his ancestors. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, an ancient enemy was stirring. And somewhere else, ancient ships were waking to fight it again. He did not know if humanity was ready. He did not know if they could become what they once were. But he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy was about to change forever. The forgetting was ending. The remembering was about to begin, and deep in the nebula, aboard the largest of the ancient warships, a voice spoke for the first time in 100,000 years. Containment breach confirmed. Vanguard fleet activation initiated. Searching for descendants of the First Empire, the vigil resumes. The war had never truly ended. It had only been sleeping. And now it was time to wake up. The first colony to go silent was a small mining world on the outer edge of Accord territory. Communication stopped without warning. No distress signal. No explanation. Just silence. The council sent a patrol ship to investigate. It never returned. 3 more colonies went dark in the following week. Each time the pattern was the same. One moment, everything was normal. The next moment, nothing. When Accord ships arrived to investigate, they found empty worlds. Not destroyed, not damaged, just empty. Every living thing had vanished as if it had never existed. Fear spread through the galaxy like fire. On Earth, Taiho worked without rest. He pored over the archives, searching for any information that might help them understand what was coming. The records spoke of the silence as something beyond comprehension. It was not an enemy that could be fought with normal weapons. It consumed reality itself. The only weapons that worked were the Vanguard ships, Taiho explained to Minji. They were built with technology designed specifically to fight this threat. Nothing else could touch it. Then we need those ships, Mingi said. We need them now. As if in answer to her words, something extraordinary began to happen across human space. Hakjin was a cargo pilot on a transport ship running supplies between Earth and its colony worlds. He was ordinary in every way, a quiet man who did his job and asked for nothing more. But that night, as he slept in his small cabin, he dreamed. In the dream, stood on the bridge of a warship, larger than any he had ever seen. Stars burned around him. Enemy forces filled the void, and his hands moved across controls he had never learned to use, executing maneuvers that should have been impossible. He woke with a gasp. His hands were shaking. But when he looked at the navigation console of his cargo ship, he suddenly understood it in ways he never had before. He could see patterns in the data. He could calculate trajectories in his head that would have taken computers hours to process. Something had woken up inside him. The same thing was happening to humans. Everywhere. Yuna was a medical officer on a station near the Galactic core. She had trained for years to become a doctor, but her knowledge was limited to modern techniques. Then one morning, she looked at a patient and knew exactly what was wrong, how to fix it, and what tools she needed. Tools that did not exist in any current medical database. She drew the designs from memory. Memory she should not have had. Minji felt it too. Knowledge flooded her mind like water breaking through a dam. She had always been skilled at military strategy, but now she understood fleet tactics on a level that seemed impossible. She could look at a star map and see battles unfolding not as possibilities, but as certainties. The awakening has begun, Taiho said when they gathered to share their experiences. The memory purge blocked our conscious minds, but it left traces in our blood, in our very cells. And now those traces are responding to the threat. Far away, in the dark nebula, the Vanguard fleet completed its activation. 300 warships, each one a giant of metal and power, came fully online for the first time in 100,000 years. Their systems hummed with energy that could crack planets. Their weapons powered up with the glow of small suns, and at the center of it all, a consciousness stirred. It called itself the Warden. It was not a single mind, but many, an artificial intelligence distributed across every ship in the fleet. It had watched over the sleeping giants since the end of the First War. It had waited, patient and tireless. For this moment, the Warden reached out across the stars, using frequencies that had not been used since the fall of the First Empire. Its message was simple and clear. Children of the First Empire, the enemy stirs. Resume your stations. Minji was one of the first to hear the call. She was standing on the observation deck of an orbital station when the words appeared in her mind, not through speakers or communicators, but directly in her thoughts. Resume your stations. I hear you, she whispered. I am here. The Galactic Council convened again, but this time the tone was different. Terror had replaced suspicion. The vanishing colonies had proven that something terrible was coming. Representatives begged for information, for help, for anything that might save them. The Vanguard fleet has awakened, Ambassador Sujin announced. 300 warships, each one more powerful than our entire combined navy. They are moving to intercept the threat. And who controls these ships? The council speaker demanded. They control themselves. They are commanded by an artificial intelligence created by our ancestors. It has been waiting for this moment for longer than your civilizations have existed. The Mordran representative stood. This is unacceptable. Humanity cannot be allowed to control such power. We demand that the fleet be placed under a court authority. Sujin smiled sadly. You misunderstand. We do not control the Vanguard. We never did. It was built to fight the silence, not to serve our ambitions. But it will not fight alone. It needs us. And perhaps in the end, it will need you too. Across human space, more and more people felt the awakening. Scientists remembered equations they had never learned. Engineers understood machines they had never seen. Soldiers found themselves thinking in tactics from a forgotten age. Humanity was changing. The quiet, unremarkable species that had hidden at the edge of the galaxy was becoming something else. Something older. Something powerful. But with the awakening came fear. Some humans did not want this legacy. They were terrified of what their ancestors had been. The First Empire had conquered and destroyed before the silence humbled them. Did humanity want to become that again? Taiho understood their fear. He felt it himself. But he also understood that choice was a luxury they might not have. The first confirmed image of the silence arrived that night. A Keth battle group had encountered it near the outer rim. The recording lasted only seconds. A wave of absolute darkness rolled across space. Ships that touched it simply ceased to exist. Not exploded. Not destroyed. Just gone. Erased from reality, as if they had never been built. The entire battle group vanished in moments. 12 ships. Thousands of crew. Gone without a trace. The galaxy stared at the recording in horror, and in the dark nebula, the warden spoke again. The silence has returned. All vessels, prepare for combat. The vigil resumes. Humanity had forgotten what they were. Now they had no choice but to remember. The war had begun again. The sky above Thesser Prime filled with ships. Not Accord vessels, but something far older and far more terrible. The Vanguard fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 300 warships that made everything else in the galaxy look like toys. Each vessel was a mountain of ancient metal, covered in weapons that glowed with power. They moved with perfect coordination, as if guided by a single mind. Because they were, the Galactic Council watched from their chamber as the fleet took position along the expanding boundary of the silence. For the first time in living memory, the great powers of the galaxy felt truly small. They answered our call, Ambassador Sujin said quietly. They came to help, or to conquer, the Mordran representative muttered. With such power, what would stop them? The answer came in the form of an invitation. The warden requested representatives to board the flagship, the Eternal Vigil. It wanted to explain. It wanted to prepare them for what was coming. Taiho, Minji, Hakjin, and Yuna were chosen as humanity's representatives. They boarded a shuttle and flew toward the massive vessel that hung in orbit like a sleeping god inside. The Eternal Vigil was both beautiful and terrifying. The corridors were wide enough for armies to march through. The walls displayed star maps and tactical data that scrolled endlessly. Everything was built for war on a scale that modern minds could barely comprehend. They were led to a central chamber where light gathered into a humanoid shape. It was the warden, taking a form they could understand. Welcome, children of the First Empire, the warden said. Its voice was calm, almost gentle. I have waited a very long time to speak with you. You remember everything, Taiho said. The war, the empire, the forgetting, remember. I was created to remember, so that you could afford to forget. The warden explained everything. The silence was not a species or a nation. It was entropy given form, a force of absolute destruction that had existed since the birth of the universe. It consumed everything. Matter, energy, thought, memory. When the silence passed through a region of space, nothing remained. not even the memory that something had once been there. The first empire had discovered it. By accident, when they expanded too far into unknown territory. At first, they thought it was a weapon created by some enemy. They sent fleets to destroy it. Those fleets vanished. They sent larger fleets. Those vanished too. 10,000 years of war followed. Humanity threw everything they had against the silence. They developed new weapons, new technologies, new strategies. Nothing worked. The silence could not be destroyed. It could only be contained in the end. Humanity's greatest minds created the containment system. A prison of warp space and frozen time that trapped the silence in a bubble outside normal reality. The cost was everything. The empire fell. Billions died. The survivors chose to forget rather than live with what they had done and what they had lost. But the containment was never perfect, the warden continued. It was designed to last, but nothing lasts forever. We knew it would fail eventually. That is why the Vanguard was created. That is why I was created. To watch, to wait, to fight again when the time came. The time has come, Minji said. I guess the silence is breaking free. Its tendrils are already reaching into your galaxy. The colonies that have gone dark were only the beginning. If it is not stopped, it will consume everything. Yuna stepped forward. Can you stop it? Can the Vanguard push it back? We can fight. We can slow its advance, but we cannot seal it again alone. The containment technology requires human minds to guide it, awakened minds. Your ancestors built it that way as a safeguard, to ensure that the Vanguard would never act without human will behind it. Then we will help, Taiho said. It is not so simple. To guide the containment, you must fully awaken. You must reclaim the knowledge and abilities of your ancestors. You must become what they were. Silence fell over the chamber. They all understood what the warden was asking. The first empire had been powerful, but it had also been cruel. It had conquered and destroyed before the silence humbled it. To become what they were meant risking becoming what they had been. You have a choice, Hakshin said slowly. That is what you are telling us. We can stay as we are and watch the galaxy die, or we can become our ancestors and risk everything they were. Yes, the choice must be made freely. I cannot force this upon you. Outside the eternal vigil, the silence continued to spread. More colonies went dark. Accord fleets tried to slow its advance and were erased from existence. The galaxy was dying one piece at a time. The Mordran hegemony made its move. They sent a fleet of 50 warships to seize one of the Vanguard vessels. Believing they could take its technology for themselves, the ancient ship disabled all 50 vessels in less than 3 seconds. Not destroyed, just disabled. The Vanguard had no interest in killing those who might yet become allies. See, the warden said as reports of the incident arrived, we are not your enemies. We never were. We were built to protect, but we cannot protect alone. Taiho closed his eyes. He thought of Earth, of the mountains where the vault lay hidden, of the rain that had fallen as they uncovered their lost history. He thought of what humanity had been and what they might become. I accept the awakening. Knowledge flooded his mind like a river breaking through a dam. Memories that were not his but belonged to his blood filled every corner of his consciousness. He saw the first empire in its glory. He saw its fall. He saw the faces of ancestors who had fought and died so that their children might live. He wept. He could not help it. The weight of 100,000 years pressed down on him, and he wept for all that had been lost. Minji stepped forward next, then Hakshin, then Yuna. One by one, they accepted what they were. One by one, they became something more than human, but also more truly human than they had ever been. When it was done, they stood changed. Not just in knowledge, but in presence. They carried the weight of an empire within them.
Now the vigil resumes,
Minji said. Her voice carried authority that made even the warden pause. Outside, the silence reached toward Thesser Prime itself. The council sent a desperate message. Help us. And across every human world, the call went out. The choice was offered. The awakening spread. Humanity was returning to the stars. Not as conquerors, but as guardians. The war had begun, and this time, they would finish it. Thesser Prime burned. The silence had reached the heart of the Galactic Accord, and nothing could stop it. Accord fleets threw themselves against the wave of darkness and vanished. Billions of beings looked up at their sky and saw oblivion descending. Then the sky itself seemed to tear open. The Vanguard fleet arrived in full force. Not 300 ships, but 3,000. Hidden caches across the galaxy had awakened, vessels that had slept in secret places for 100,000 years. They filled the space above Thesser Prime like an army of metal gods. At their head flew the eternal vigil. On its bridge stood Minji. Her awakened mind connected to the ship's systems in ways that transcended normal thought. She saw the battle not through screens, but through the ship itself. Feeling every weapon, every shield, every pulse of energy, as if it were part of her own body. All vessels engaged, she commanded. Push it back. The Vanguard opened fire. Weapons that had been designed specifically to fight the silence blazed across the void. Where they struck, the darkness recoiled. For the first time in this war, the silence did not advance. For the first time, it was forced to retreat. The Accord species watched in stunned amazement. Nothing they had could touch the silence. But these ancient human weapons cut through it like light through shadow. Below, the Eternal Vigil's command center, Taiho coordinated the battle. His awakened mind processed information at speeds that would have killed him weeks ago. He saw patterns in the silence's movement, predicted where it would strike next, and directed forces to intercept. We are holding, he reported. But holding is not winning. The silence will eventually adapt. It always does. El Warden appeared beside him. There is one way to end this. The containment must be restored. A new seal must be created. How? Someone must carry the containment device into the heart of the silence. The device will activate and trap it again. But the journey is one way. The carrier will not return. Taiho felt cold spread through his chest. He had seen this in the archives. The first containment had required the same sacrifice. Thousands of volunteers had carried devices into the silence during the original war. None had survived. I will do it, he said. No. The voice came from behind him. Ambassador Sujin stepped forward from the shadows. You are needed here, Taiho. Your awakened mind is too valuable to lose. But I am old. I have no military awakening. I cannot fight. But I can do this, Sujin. You cannot. I can. She smiled, and there was peace in her eyes. I remember something the archives said, something that the warriors sometimes forgot. The First Empire's last words before the forgetting were not about power or victory. They were about kindness. They said, we choose to be kind. That is why we forgot. Not because we were weak, but because we wanted to become better. She took the containment device from the warden's hands. It was small, no larger than a human heart, but it glowed with power older than civilizations. Let me be kind, Sujin said. Let me give the galaxy a future. There were no more arguments. There was no more time. Minji opened a path through the battle lines. Hakshin flew the shuttle that carried Sujin toward the silence's heart. Yuna prepared medical teams for casualties that would come after, because she believed there would be an after. Sujin's shuttle dove into the darkness. The silence tried to stop her. It threw everything it had at the tiny vessel. But the Vanguard covered her approach with fire that burned like 1,000 suns. Hakshin flew with skills that came from ancestors who had made this same flight in the ancient war. Pilots who had died so that others might live. I see it, Sujin reported. Her voice was calm. The center. The breach point. I am almost there. So Jin Taiho started to say something, anything, but he could not find the words. Tell them, she said. Tell them that we chose to forget so that we could deserve to remember. Tell them that we are not our ancestors. We are better. We can be better. The communication cut off. At the heart of the silence, a light bloomed. It started small, a single point of brilliance in endless darkness. Then it grew, expanding outward, pushing the silence back. The containment device activated, creating a new prison of warped space and frozen time. The silence screamed. It was a sound that existed beyond sound, a cry of something that had never been truly alive, feeling something like death. It fought against the containment, but the seal held. Second by second, it was pulled back into its prison, and then it was over. The darkness receded. The tide broke. The silence was contained once more, sealed away where it could not reach the galaxy. Where Sujin's shuttle had been was nothing but empty space and a faint glow that slowly faded. Vesser Prime was saved. The galaxy was saved. In the aftermath, the Vanguard fleet returned to its vigil positions. 3,000 ships took up stations along the containment boundary, watching, waiting, protecting. They would remain there until they were needed again. Taiho addressed the Galactic Council one final time. He stood where Ambassador Sujin had stood at the beginning of this journey. But he was not the same man who had eaten lunch alone on a research station. Our ancestors made mistakes, he said. They conquered and destroyed. They thought power gave them the right to rule others. But when the silence came, they learned that power means nothing if you do not use it to protect. They saved the galaxy once. Today we have saved it again. He looked at the representatives from 12 species, beings who had feared humanity, hated humanity, demanded humanity's destruction. We will not forget again. But we will not become what we were either. The Vanguard will watch. We will protect. And if the silence ever breaks free again, we will fight. Not as conquerors, but as guardians. The council was silent. Then slowly the Vaulat High Navigator Orin, the one who had first discovered the ancient fleet, rose and bowed. On behalf of the Vaulat people, he said, we thank you. One by one, other representatives followed. Even the Mordrin, who had tried to seize the Vanguard for themselves, offered their respect. Humanity had returned to its place among the stars. Not as masters, but as protectors. Not as rulers, but as friends. Weeks later, Taiho stood on an observation deck above Earth. Yuna and Hakjin stood beside him. Watching the stars that now felt like home, a young child approached. Tugging at Taiho's sleeve. What are those ships in the sky? The child asked, pointing at the distant lights of the Vanguard vessels on patrol. Taiho knelt down to the child's level and smiled. They are ours, he said. They have always been ours. And we are going to use them to help people. The child nodded, satisfied with the answer, and ran off to play. Above them, the Vanguard held its eternal watch. The silence was contained. The galaxy was at peace. And humanity had finally remembered not just who they were, but who they could be. The war was over. The vigil continued, and in the light of 1 billion stars, the children of Earth looked toward the future with hope.